Welcome to the next St. Damien community interview. The St. Damien community is a group of philosophy and theology students who live at American College, Leuven, and we are a primarily Christian community. Today we're interviewing our chaplain, Father Robert, and the topic of the interview will be prayer. We recently had a retreat where we discussed three modes of prayer: Lectio, Divina, Ignatian spirituality, and contemplative prayer. So I hope you enjoyed the video. One of my favourites, Lectio Divina, because we did Lectio and Ignatian spirituality yesterday. I've been doing Lectio for a long time, but Ignatian spirituality I've never touched before, which is kind of strange thinking because it's been quite a long time since I've been into Catholic spirituality. So that was a new tradition I was learning. But I don't know, for you, was Lectio anything?
Yeah, it was indeed something new for me, at least to focus on like very few small parts of the scripture, instead of just reading the whole story and trying to find a message through that. I found it very powerful that just these small words that could speak to you that could be maybe different from whatever day you're reading it.
Yeah.
That in that way God tries to reach you. I found that very powerful.
Yeah.
Definitely something new that I will take with me on my spiritual life after this retreat. Yeah.
Do you remember your first Lectio Divina at all?
Like when I first was introduced to the practice? You know, I would think it must have been at some point when I was in high school, secondary school, and I was working with a priest, the spiritual director then. It might have been my junior year, so I would have been 16 maybe, 17, something like that. And at that time, I was thinking about perhaps going to seminary when I had graduated from high school. And so this priest, very wise, very holy man, already retired, so he was in his late 70s, was introducing me to different forms of prayer. And he was very much into Ignatian prayer, so it was a lot of putting yourself in the scene, the imagination, which I've always found a little bit more difficult to do, but also introducing me to Lectio Divina and to praying with the scriptures. And the way he kind of described it was you're taking the sacred text, right, whether it's the gospel or the reading of the day, or whether you're moving through a book of the Bible, and you kind of are, as we said yesterday, right, reading it slowly, expectantly, and then once you come to something, once something speaks to you, that's when you kind of put your finger in the page and close the book. So you're not reading again to get to the end of it or to learn something in the traditional academic sense. We do that enough during the day. This is rather once God kind of grabs your attention with something in the text and you kind of stop.
Yeah. The Ignatian spirituality thing about imagination, I mean, I can get very silly all the time. So it's trying the Ignatian spirituality of putting yourself into the scriptures. Yesterday it was kind of a weird experience because everyone had very powerful insights the way they were doing it. They were like imagining themselves in different parts of the different characters. But for me, it's somehow like just my imagination played out almost a bit like in a dream where just random elements would just suddenly come into play. And for some reason, for example, Zacchaeus the tax collector was on a palm tree.
Okay.
And then I got super fixated on my imagining a palm tree, and then it just kind of unraveled. So I don't know if what kind of, you said you find it hard to imagine yourself in scripture. What kind of experience do you have with?
Yeah, I think part of my struggle is similar to what you had shared, is that sometimes for me and perhaps for others, it can be the case that you're trying to create the perfect scene. So I'm thinking, okay, if this scene is taking place in the time of our Lord, say he's in Jerusalem, I'm thinking, all right, what would Jerusalem look like at that time? What would the people around him be wearing? And I want to be kind of the stage director, having a love of theater, kind of trying to get all the details correct. Which the real point of it, of course, is not that. So that can kind of lead us astray or make it difficult. But just as in Lectio Divina, the reading of the sacred text and our sort of thinking about it, ruminating on it, kind of then opens us up to the mystery of God, to an encounter with God. In the Ignatian way of kind of putting yourself in the scene, it's allowing not so much the intellect exactly, but allowing our imagination or our imaginative faculty, allowing God to kind of speak and work through that. So different ways to kind of think about that or enter into that are, rather than trying to perhaps focus on the whole scene and get everything right, is just perhaps focus in on a very small element of it. So we discussed and prayed last night with the encounter between Jesus and Zacchaeus, so perhaps imagining oneself as Zacchaeus, and what would you see from sitting on the sycamore tree, or perhaps the palm tree, as it were, and then when Jesus stops, what are you feeling there? What does his expression look like? So trying to really sort of hone in on just a few details, on just one perspective, on just one aspect of the story. But I think, as I said in our introductory session for this retreat, is that it's these are all pathways. They're all pathways leading to God, not techniques, not rigid kind of formulae, but different pathways. And for any one of us, one pathway will resonate more than another, and then we kind of pursue that.
Yeah.
Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit, je vous exhorte, mes frères, par la tendresse de Dieu.
Indeed, there are so many pathways to the Lord. How do you? Which methods do you use to pray? Do you have a fixed schedule on at this hour I'm going to, first of all, Mass, or this hour I'm going to do Lectio Divina, or is it more of, this is what I feel like right now would work best for me? What is your regimen?
Well, that's a good question. I think everyone has to kind of find their own rhythm in that, and I think there could be a lot of different ways that you could think about prayer, but consistency is important. Just as in any relationship, I think if we were in a relationship with a friend or a loved one or a partner or something like that, and you said, well, I'm only going to call this person or text them when I remember to or when I feel like it, our lives get very busy. So I think in primary relationships, it's important to kind of have some sort of a schedule or routine, not in the sense that boxes us in and makes us mechanical in this relationship, but helps us to be consistent. And those moments of kind of just showing up, sometimes that's the best that we can do. But again, that's an action of the will. We're opening ourselves up to God. So I think that consistency is really important in a life of prayer. For myself, I love routine and schedule, so that's not a difficult thing. But I pray best in the morning. So for me, the first hour of the day goes to God. The second hour of the day is exercise, kind of preparations, and then after that, I'm off to class or at the desk or at the library or wherever. In terms of type of prayer, so when you're ordained a deacon, the step before being ordained a priest, you make a promise to pray the Liturgy of the Hours, which is a collection of prayers based almost exclusively on Scripture. So it's a praying of psalms and canticles, readings, intercessions, etc. And that's kind of meant to punctuate the day. Religious communities, such as the community we're spending this weekend with, or then my own community of Holy Cross, depending on the type of community and the sort of work and lifestyle they will have a schedule for when they come together to pray the Liturgy of the Hours, also called the Divine Office. And then when you're not praying it together, then you pray it by yourself. So that's kind of punctuates or gives certain pauses to my day. Now I'm living, of course, with all of you in Leuven, so I'm not living with my community, so I pray Liturgy of the Hours by myself. So the first 2 hours of it, they don't take an hour to pray, of course, but I should clarify that. Each individual office might take anywhere from 20 to 5 minutes, 8 minutes if it's one of the shorter ones. But I kind of begin the day with the first 2, which is office of readings and morning prayer. Then I typically will move into Lectio Divina with the daily readings, with also kind of an eye to the fact that I'm going to have to give a little bit of a homily at the end of the day on these readings. So kind of do that, and then conclude with some contemplative prayer, centering prayer, which we're going to talk about just after this interview in our last session today. So some kind of quiet prayer. So that takes me 50 minutes to an hour to kind of get through all that.
Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit, je vous exhorte, mes frères, par la tendresse de Dieu.
And something we didn't talk about during our time is also intercessory prayer. So I guess we spoke about this a little bit in the beginning in terms of who are we bringing with us on retreat. But I also have a list, and I always encourage folks in this practice of people that I'm bringing to prayer each day. And of course, there are others that you may integrate into that list if someone asks you to pray for them. But I think that's an important part, is to name some of those key people in your life and
Because
to
I
pray
think
for them.
when I do prayers, if there's no intercession part, it's almost it just becomes me praying with God.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. yeah.
And especially I talked to Hayden about this as well. He's a big fan of the Jesus prayer. Sometimes when I do the Jesus prayer, I forget that I'm praying with the church.
That's right.
And
Yes.
then I'm
yeah.
just saying, Jesus Christ, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, a sinner. And it's just, and then the more I say that, it's like, wait a second, I'm just thinking about me as a sinner, me as a sinner. Me as a
Yeah,
sinner.
yeah.
I mean, the whole church is praying the prayer with you. So
Absolutely. I think that's a beautiful thing in liturgy of the hours, no matter what language you're praying them in, right? So, say doing morning prayer in English is the same morning prayer that, that Pope Leo is doing in Rome, or that a group of lay folks perhaps in the United Kingdom are doing, or wherever. So there's, and at all different hours as the globe kind of moves around, people are both praying the liturgy of the hours and celebrating Eucharist together. So, there's a saying, I think it comes from the Zen Buddhist tradition, that the one who sits in meditation sits with the whole world. And I think that's true of us. I think we have the similar understanding, that as we're kind of breathing in and out the Psalms, these ancient prayers of the church, full of history and beauty and full of so much humanity, some raw humanity, right? As we're kind of praying these ancient prayers, the prayers that Jesus would have heard, right? As a young person throughout his life, we're kind of breathing with the whole Christian body throughout the world.
And the one somehow it's so easy to forget the dead.
Yes.
And the whole angelic hosts, and that really so when I'm praying alone, sometimes it gets lonely sometimes, but then you remember that you're part of this choir.
Yes.
And I especially have this sense. So this, maybe we should talk a bit about this monastic apostolic community actually, because they're an offshoot of the Franciscans, but they have a very monastic way of praying. And it's a rare opportunity to pray as a whole community, the Liturgy of the Hours, and all of the Liturgy of the Hours. And I've realized that it's been really helpful in terms of, even when I'm not feeling it, somehow everyone else there is there to support me through the prayers. You talked yesterday about prayers you can, not as you can't. One of the things I was just thinking about was when it's difficult to pray, the support of the others is really, I really lean on that sometimes. I wonder if any of both of you had some experience with this.
Well, I found the masses here quite beautiful here at the community. That being here in Wallonia, all of it or most of it was in French, and some of it in Dutch, but it also had different books, and I kind of tried to go through the book and see if I could find a song, but sometimes I realized it was kind of nice to just be there and sit there while the other brothers, they were singing, and even though I didn't know the words, and I still felt like the intent of prayer all together in the room. And like you said, I think that the feeling of togetherness in prayer really lifted me up this weekend. That was really nice. Yeah.
Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit, je vous exhorte, mes frères, par la tendresse de Dieu.
What would you say to someone who's just starting Lectio? And sometimes, for example, I remember when I started, nothing in the text was jumping out. In the sense that there would be something in the text, for example, that I might pay attention to, but I remember like finding it very hard to think more about exactly what I'm supposed to think when I pay attention to something. So what would you say about that?
Yeah, I think first off, in terms of engaging in any prayer practice, but especially in Lectio, in your example, and especially at the beginning, I should say, is not to become super focused on results. I think that's one of the biggest things in prayer, is that everything else in our lives, whether as academics, professional folks, whatever, we evaluate so much based on the results. And we tend to even evaluate relationships based on, how is this going? How do I feel about this? How is it? Think about if you meet somebody new, right, and you start spending time with them, you start to think, well, how is this going? Is the conversation easy and relaxed? And we tend to project all of that onto prayer, right? And prayer is relationship. In fact, it's the most fundamental relationship. But it's different, right? So I think that's just important, just to breathe easy in terms of that, and not to be focused on results or an evaluation. Am I doing this right? How is this going? All the rest. With that being said, I think for Lectio Divina, a couple things. First off is to take it slow. And again, it's a reading that is slow, that is meditative, that is open, that is expectant, that God is saying something to me through this inspired text, right? Through this psalm, this gospel passage, what have you. So I think just reminding ourselves of that. And then, as you use a good word there, Tong, noticing. Noticing, we talked about awareness a lot yesterday. That is really a fundamental piece of it. That word or that phrase or that image that is jumping out to you. And then I think it's a little bit of that sitting and rumination, as you mentioned, but not putting any kind of determination on that. So I think it would be less helpful for one to say, oh, well, okay, this phrase is I'm noticing this, or this is speaking to me. All right, what am I supposed to get out of it? You kind of have to, I think it's kind of just like, it's a gentle noticing. It's a breathing in and breathing out and saying, okay. And this could be part of the prayer, is just asking, Lord, what are you trying to communicate here? What are you showing to me? And then, what am I feeling as this kind of word strikes me? And then just kind of sitting there, sitting in that, and trusting that more will be revealed. But it's not as though, when we do research in philosophy or in theology, right? We think, okay, here's this, pericope, and I have to see where this fits into the overall oeuvre, or whatever. Not so much the case with Lectio.
I almost treat it as if so this is when I talk about my experiences with Lectio, where I'm trying to think about why this word or why this phrase jumps out. I think there is almost this like, I have to write an essay about this afterwards,
Yes,
an attitude, and some like God's gonna mark my essay.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. And it's sort of a matter of, as much as we can, putting to use a little Husserl, putting an epoche on our sort of theological constructs. Not that they're not important, and our kind of things, and just bracketing that. And then this is about, okay, Lord, what is this about? What is this? And you may come to the end of your 15, 10, 20-minute prayer period and say, like, okay, this kind of moved me. I'm not sure what this is about. And that's not less of a prayer than if you felt God like definitely giving you this phrase, and then you felt, okay, this God is kind of nudging me to do this, and I'm going to journal about this, and this is the next movement. Because that's rather rare, actually. But it's kind of like prayer is sort of spending time with God, maybe very colloquially put, hanging out with God, wasting time with God. And the point is to be with God. The point is not to try to get insight or consolation or knowledge or anything like that. We may get all those, quote unquote, get all those things, but we may not, and that's not the point. Just as the point of spending time with someone you love is not so much to find out about their life, although you may, or is not so much to be entertained, although you may as well, or to be encouraged or whatever. All these things may happen, and sometimes, hopefully, they do, right? But the main point is this time together. That's why the continual practice is important.
Yeah, and maybe the other way around. What if Lectio Divina goes too well, right? So you read the first or the second verse, and you noticed something that completely spoke to you, but you only had that 10 minutes saved for the day, and you completely like find yourself in this really nice meditative state of the prayer. How should I feel for the next session? Do I need to finish my passage from yesterday?
That's a great question, Marco. And the spiritual tradition, I believe this is also in Ignatius of Loyola's writings. I can't give you a chapter and verse, but is that you stay with the image, stay with the words, stay with the phrase, as long as you feel drawn to do so. So again, it's not saying, all right, well, I feel really moved by this word, phrase, or image in the second sentence, but I want to get this whole chapter done, or the whole gospel today has 5 more lines, so I want to get to the end. When you find yourself, maybe I should have emphasized this a little bit more, but if you find yourself very much drawn to something, or noticing something, aware of something, you stop there, and that's your movement into this time with God, and I think if your time is up and you still feel that there's something there, there's a draw, there's a noticing, there's an encounter with God there, then the next day you come back to that. You keep coming back to that place, that word or that phrase, until it proves not to be fruitful anymore. Then you move on. And that could be the same thing with the Ignatian sort of contemplation, imaginative prayer too. You stay in that place, stay in that scene or that encounter, until you feel that you have to move on, or there's no more kind of fruit coming out of it. It's so I think that's a really crucial part. It's not about, the spiritual life is not about, Thomas Merton says, it's not about getting anywhere, because we're already there. If you're in this time, we're already there. And I think this is why the invitation is for us to be faithful to the practice, even when it seems difficult, try, we're very distracted, all the rest, because as time goes on, hopefully we spend more and more time with the Lord in these moments of prayer, however we do it, consistently. Then we begin to get a feel. Our spiritual senses become more and more attuned. This doesn't mean that they're always rosy and we always feel fulfilled all the time. Think about Mother Teresa. We found from her journals that she spent so much of her life not really feeling God's presence, right? But was faithful to that prayer, and you can continue to get a sense of, well, what is this space? Because each of us, in the core of our being, have a space, right, where God lives, a space of meeting and encounter, and we have to start to feel at home in that space and kind of see what it's like, kind of reconnoiter it a little bit, but that takes time.
Yeah.
Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit, je vous exhorte, mes frères, par la tendresse de Dieu.
Yesterday you said something interesting about Zacchaeus in the tree, and with the Ignatian prayer, Ignatian imagination. We're always thinking from the perspective of seeing God, trying to see God, and in the case of Zacchaeus trying to see God. If we put ourselves into the position of Zacchaeus, there's this notion of being seen by God. Now that, I think, going back to some of the things you were saying about trying to get results and effort to, it's often we're thinking from the perspective, we need to see God. God isn't, it's almost like we have to tug at a robe and be like, God, look at me.
Yeah.
Now, this was, with Ignatian spirituality, somehow when you put yourself not in the place of Christ, but the one being seen by Christ. I don't have any particular question here. That's
Yeah. Well, there's a mysterious and seemingly paradoxical element to that, right? So we, at the core of who we are is this longing for God, to be seen by God, to be in union with God. That's the longing that we have, and we experience it and we express it, I think, as best we could, given the limitation of our perspective, our human perspective, and the limitation of our language. So we have this sense of, this desire to see God. I want to see you, Lord. This desire of, I want to find God. People say that all the time, and even in our own age, we have this, it's almost trite now where people say, well, I'm not religious in the sense of being committed to a certain set of beliefs or a certain tradition, so on and so forth, but I'm kind of searching for God. I'm seeking God. But I think the great spiritual writers and masters would tell us that the kind of more we journey into that and embrace that in a serious way, this quest for God, this search for God. Benedict in the Rule talks about never forgetting about the quest for God, the more we kind of embrace that and quote unquote do that or enact that, the more we realize that in a sense, we've already been found by God. It's God who actually always does the initiative in prayer and in the spiritual life. It's God who is seeking us. So we get into some interesting kind of metaphysics, but we don't have to try to unravel here now. But it's a sense that if God were to stop thinking about any of us for a split second, it'd be the greatest disappearance act of all time, as my undergraduate professor used to say. So the sense that we have to kind of cajole God into noticing us or loving us is not exactly true. But we're God's children, and that's children sometimes have silly things that they think about their parents. It's a great. I was just reading some of this in some of the coursework that I'm doing, but it's a step of maturation. A lot of the psychoanalysts will say that when the child can, after a few months, can be separated from the mother, right, for longer periods of time, not having its needs immediately met, but realizing and gaining a sense of trust or confidence that the mother will return in a sense, and that the needs of the child will be met, that the child is of value. So perhaps that's something, that's a way of thinking, mutatis mutandis, about our own spiritual lives, is that as we kind of grow in practice, in the practice of the faith and of prayer, sustained and nourished, of course, by the sacramental life of the church, the praying community, we then kind of our spiritual senses, our spiritual life starts to grow and to mature in a sense, and that's when, and then we might not always feel all the consolation or feel that our needs are being met or feel that we're finding God necessarily, but that's an opportunity for great growth. I think a difficult challenge that many folks face, and we all face to some extent, is that when the feelings are not there, when the consolation is not there, and when perhaps doubt is added to that, and we think, am I just wasting my time? Are you really there, Lord? Is this all real, or is just this some kind of navel gazing, Is this really a relationship, or is this something else, People can get really freaked out by that and think like, I'm losing my faith, I don't know, maybe this was like just, 2 months or a year or a couple of weeks sort of spiritual high, and now I'm coming back to my normal self, which is, what it is, the brute reality of it. But I think it's my conviction that the deeper one goes in faith, as you try to believe more, try to understand more, try to grow a relationship with God and experience some of that, try to open more of your heart to God. As you go deeper in that dimension, the sort of quote unquote temptation or the doubt or the difficulty or the dryness also is going to go deeper, because more is at stake. More is at stake. The more you try to know God, the more you try to live the life of His Son in the world, the more you commit yourself, the more that is existentially at stake. So there's going to be a counterbalance or something to that may raise questions. But that is an opportunity to continue to go deeper, and again, not to keep drawing these relational analogies, but I think it's true. Obviously, being a religious, this is not my daily experience, but they talk about the proverbial honeymoon phase being over, and then it gets down to the hard work of like, you're in committed relationship with this person, and now they're kind of annoying, or this isn't fun anymore. There's the stress of children and bills and unexpected things going wrong, and dealing with one another's failures and all the rest. So what does that mean? Does that mean, well, this was all a charade, and now maybe I should find somebody else that fulfills me? In our Christian tradition, we would say no. This is a call to kind of going deeper. This is a call for love to mature. That's why it's not so much like the old song says that love will keep us together. No, actually, it's not so much the love that sustains, say, the marriage, but it actually moves into the marriage, the commitment, the covenant that actually will sustain the love. It's not so much my zeal every day, necessarily my feelings for the faith, for the Lord, that sustain my vows, but it's more like my vows that sustain my faith and prayer and all the rest. So I think, and that's really hard. I'm not saying this is easy stuff, right? Because we are human. We need to be affirmed. We need to feel good, right? We need to have some of these things. So hopefully that does come in, but that's not the norm necessarily. So it's a maturing process. But that's, no one can stay sort of in spiritual, not childhood, because that could be a beautiful thing, but adolescence maybe is a way to say it. But there's, for it to be really worthwhile and really to shape us, there's a deepening that goes there. Another way to talk about this is perhaps the cross. We never escape the cross in life. Jesus is very clear about that in the Gospels. If you want to be my disciple, take up the cross. And part of the cross is, the woundedness of our nature, the brokenness with which we struggle, and the fact that we are not in the heavenly Jerusalem yet. This is a pilgrimage. This is a journey, and journeys have rough patches.
Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit, je vous exhorte, mes frères, par la tendresse de Dieu.
There was this Benedictine who he said this, and this sort of visitor said, I've been here for 2 weeks and it's been like I've been riding a high, and then suddenly it just feels all very ordinary. And then the Benedictine abbot said, that's your experience of losing the mystique and entering the mystical.
That's a great way to put it.
And so he sees that as the beginning of the faith journey now.
Yes.
Because there's that Beatles song, Love is All You Need.
Yes.
And in a certain sense, I remember Hauerwas saying, love is not all you need.
Right, yeah. And if you think about, this idea of love too, there certainly is an affective dimension to it, right? But it's a lot more, it's a lot deeper. I think that, Thomistic sense of love is the objective willing the good of the other, so love is about willing, love is about decision, and feelings are there in the beginning to lead us to that, and they kind of give us these things along the way, but ultimately it's an act of the will. We decide, Christ decided to lay down his life and to love us, and I think that's a hard thing, and I think that's perhaps part of the struggle we see in the world today, is this deep longing for love and commitment and communion, but sometimes we don't know how to go about that, or how to persevere in that. You mentioning that Benedictine thing made me think of this book. I'm going to butcher the title, but I think it's a novel, but I think it's called Cosmos and the Love of God, or Damien and the Love of God. I think it's Cosmos. But anyway, it's the story about a young man who enters a Trappist monastery and is kind of discerning his life there and all the rest. And, it's part of their discernment process is you spend, a couple of weeks, and then you kind of, as a visit, and then you kind of leave, and then you might spend a month or two, and then you'll kind of come. So you're like doing this discernment back and forth. And at some point in the novel, this young person who was kind of discerning this monastic life, very intense life, cloistered life, is speaking to an older monk, who may be the novice master, I don't recall, but and is saying how much some of the positive aspects of the life, but so that he finds that he needs to take these times away from the monastery, away from the silence and the rigor of the life, the enclosure, and then he just for a little bit, and he could come back and he's ready again. He said it's as though I'm a fish, and I just need to kind of come up for air sometimes, and then I could go back down. But the monk says to him something like, yeah, but living this life, living the monastic life, is not so much coming up for air, but it's learning how to breathe underwater. And I think that's really the case. So many folks would, might travel to exotic places, to monasteries or to ashrams, wherever, and they're seeking a spiritual experience. But the real thing is to commit to a way of life.
Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit, je vous exhorte, mes frères, par la tendresse de Dieu.
I wanted to add my own experience. This summer, I got some revelation, if you will, that I really wanted to come back to Catholic life, and it started out indeed like some kind of honeymoon phase. I was reading scripture, and I was pretty much like every day, half an hour in the church. Well, for me, that's a lot, but maybe not for other people. But I was like really spending a lot of time, and then the academic year started, and my fear was indeed that, well, what am I gonna do once it's not like mystical, or what am I gonna do once I kind of like got the routine down, and I'm like, well, it wouldn't bring me much anymore. But what led to me after this summer was this feeling of craving, rather, not so much of like, I need to do this because it's a hard relationship. I actually felt really the idea of like, well, I really want to receive the Eucharist at least once a week, and I feel really want to do silent prayer every day. I try to do something that's maybe counterintuitive on the days that I'm most busy. I really want to have at least 10 minutes of silent prayer, and just the amount of like positive energy I've gotten from these habits has been crazy, and I wouldn't have expected this from the first place, and it feels super nice. It's really a way of growing from it, and even being out of this honeymoon phase, I'm really glad that like indeed there's still something left, and I saw the to put the analogy, I saw the relationship of, wow, this is really worth committing to.
Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit, je vous exhorte, mes frères, par la tendresse de Dieu.
Would you say there's a memory of one particular moment in prayer that is sort of opened out a new world, or sort of really shifted something in you? Maybe something you can't quite describe, but
You go first.
So I was thinking of a memory I had from this summer. It was so the context of me wanting to come back was to Catholicism. Is that we actually had the alumni come over this summer, and these are all wonderful people, and most of them priests, and one of them, Father John Soares from Rhode Island, he recommended me this app, Hallow, which is an American app for prayer, and it was a sunny day out, and I put my hammock in our forest area of our garden, and I was first I was reading the daily scripture, and then there was listening to a playlist of Christian music, and I looked up, and through the trees I saw the light. Like, it was super bright, although at the same time very soothing, and that was a really spiritual moment for me. I felt like very much in touch with God, and some kind of sign of this is, you're on the right track. That was something that really stood out to me in one of my moments of prayer.
Yeah, I will also ask the opposite question after this. But I mean, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few. I think in one of the earlier ones, I recommended last night that book called The Ignatian Workout, which I think the author's last name was Muldoon. But anyway, there's one of the kind of exercises that he leads the readers through is praying with the story of Lazarus Lazarus, the poor leprous man who's sitting at the door of the rich man, in the parable that Christ tells in Luke's gospel, I think it is.
Recently in
Very recently in the lectionary, yeah. So we're moving through Luke on Sundays. But anyway, just kind of praying with that image of this rich man, he has this beautiful castle, we might say, or mansion, however you want to kind of imagine it, and dying sumptuously every day, and poor Lazarus is this man living on the street, and living outside of his door. And it says that he would like to eat even the scraps that fall from the man's table, but he doesn't even get that. He doesn't even get the crumbs. Remember that image of like crumbs falling? He doesn't even. That's all he would. He'd be somewhat satisfied even if he could get some of that, but he doesn't. He's denied that, and so much more, of course. And I remember thinking about that in terms of all. I might have been 16 or 17 when I was reading this. And thinking about all the blessings that I've been given in my life, all the abundance, all the sumptuous things you could say, and then thinking how stingy I could be in my life with, denying people, these little crumbs, little moments of my time, a little bit of recognition, whatever it may be. I remember being very convicted by that, in the midst of all this abundance I've been given, so much, and then there's such a contrast in what I'm willing to kind of give and share with others.
Yeah, I remember still remember the bit on the homily where you say he remembers Lazarus's name.
Yes, yeah.
Which is very important detail for you
Yeah.
in that particular story.
Yeah, because it's not as though he were completely ignorant of the reality of Lazarus, I mean, if first off, if he's laying at the door, he would have had to literally step over, or at the very least step by him anytime he went out of his house. That's one thing. But the fact that he knows his name, I think, is even more indicting in sense of the rich man and of all of us. We know those that we're supposed to love and that we ignore.
Yeah.
Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit, je vous exhorte, mes frères, par la tendresse de Dieu.
I would say, especially for beginners, start small, but start. Don't be discouraged, and consistency is key.
Yeah.
I think consistency is key, but also be very gentle with yourself.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, Father Robert.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mark. Good to chat with you guys.
Yes.
Chat with you guys. All right. Thank you for watching this interview, and I'll see you next time.